weight loss is not a goal. It is a result, potentially, of meeting goals, because weight is not a behavior. So we work on behaviors and behavior changes. Our bodies are good, and so we must take care of them. But a healthy body is not the end goal. The end goal is theosis, it's communion with God. But we have to be able to discern if, this wellness path, whatever path we're on, is it leading us to God? Is it leading us to theosis? And if not, we might need a different path.
New Year's resolutions related to diet, health, and fitness top the list of the most popular resolutions each and every year. Today, we're speaking with Dietitian Krista Fedorchak about how we can take a sustainable and balanced approach to improving our health, nutrition in the new year, and how we can keep our efforts towards self-improvement focused on Christ by tapping into the traditions of our church. Let me tell you a little bit first about Krista. She is an Orthodox Christian, a wife, a registered dietitian. She provides one-on-one nutritional guidance to her patients, as well as faith-based insights into caring for your body and soul alike, making the connection between scientifically backed health practices and the wisdom and the teachings of the saints in the church and the fathers of the Orthodox Christian tradition. Krista, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
First of all, what is a registered dietitian? Can you tell us what you do and tell us a little bit about the patients that come to you?
Sure. So registered dietitians are the food and nutrition experts. We've completed rigorous schooling and an exam in order to obtain this credential. And dietitians can really work in many areas, basically anywhere that has food and with anyone that eats food. So it's very, very wide, but the sphere that I work in is mostly in outpatient clinical services. So people with various nutrition-related diseases where any dietary changes can positively impact their health. And then, as you mentioned in your introduction, I work in private practice as well, where I really get to lead with the wisdom and teachings of the Orthodox Church. And so I'm able to help people heal their relationship with food from an Orthodox perspective.
As we mentioned in the intro, a lot of people make the so-called New Year's resolutions to change their habits around health and nutrition, but often they find that it is easier said than done. So why is it, and why are some strategies you offer to your patients working, and why are they not working?
Sure. So definitely this time of year, New Year's, is a time for lofty goals and big promises that we make to ourselves. And that's exactly what is being targeted as well. That's definitely what we see a lot of, are these really quick changes, lose X amount of weight in a short period of time, go really intensely for a short period of time, and then you reap the rewards. But really what we know, and what I see a lot in my practice, is those approaches are not sustainable. Right? We can't keep that up. So first off, I work with patients to help set more attainable goals and kind of get away from the instant gratification that we are so used to these days.
Yeah.
And we break those down into more manageable bites. What I tell my patients and what we work with is weight loss is not a goal. It is a result, potentially, of meeting goals, because weight is not a behavior. So we work on behaviors and behavior changes.
Okay. There's a lot out there today. I mean, if you go on social media or you watch television, there's always the sort of the miracle pill that will bring it all down. And like you're saying, it's a little bit deeper than that. So let's talk for a minute about the church itself. And some people may have grown up in the church, some may not have grown up in the church, in a home that kept the fasts. We're really the first church that dealt with fasting and the benefits both spiritually and physically to people. So can you talk to us about the tools that we have within the church tradition to both support physical and spiritual wellness as one piece?
Absolutely. So you mentioned it. We have the fasts of the church. We have this ancient practice. And one thing that we often get, or is easy to be led astray about the fast, is it's all about the food. There are 3 elements to our fasting. I've heard it described as a 3-legged stool, implying that we need all 3 of those parts. And those 3 are the food element, prayer, and almsgiving. They all 3 support one another. The physical fasting is obviously a very physical practice, which helps us to discover where our weaknesses lie, what we need to work on in ourselves, and how we really need God, because we are weak and He's our source of strength. And that is directly connected to the health of our soul, right? Our prayer, that second aspect, helps us to focus our efforts on God and not all on ourselves. And then number 3, that almsgiving really turns our gaze towards our neighbor. So it's not all about us. And so all of these 3 support one another. So one really interesting aspect about the fasts of the church, I kind of liken it to, January 1st, when we're really excited to start again or try something new, or during the year, Mondays, right? Monday is when we're going to try again. We're going to start over. We're going to start fresh. But really, the church gives us a whole slew of Mondays, quote unquote, Mondays throughout the year. We have our 4 fasting and feasting periods throughout the year, our preparation periods for various feasts. Of course, we have Great Lent coming up. Also, the Advent fast, the Nativity fast that we just finished, the Dormition fast, and the Apostles fast. But we also have our Wednesdays and Fridays throughout the year as little checkpoints during the more monotonous weeks to refocus, reorient ourselves on God. And then we have even the cycle of preparation for Holy Communion. Most parishes are able to offer liturgies on Sundays and then maybe additionally during the week. So we have that practice of trying to spiritually prepare ourselves to receive the Holy Eucharist, however often you're able to do that. And even on a daily basis, our daily prayer life. I've heard it said to pray each time like it's your first time.
Yeah.
So it's really this total shift from a really intense, big picture, change everything all at once, totally do a 180 with our health and lifestyle, to each fasting period, each liturgy, each prayer, time in prayer is an opportunity to change and reorient ourselves toward God.
So what we're saying is that we really don't have to invent very much, that the church has it. So let's go over those again. There was the fasting, there was the prayer,
yes,
and then the almsgiving, correct?
You got it.
Okay, so fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. And I'll go through them in my little way. The fasting aspect is tremendous because you're not consumed with what you're going to eat. The actual prayer is a way to calm our spirit and allow us to relax and think about others and commune with God. That's so important with the fathers throughout the centuries. And then, of course, the almsgiving, which you said, just giving to others, helping other people, not being so concerned with ourselves. So, I mean, the church really, as you've outlined it, just puts those bookends on it for us. It's up to us to look and find them. Just that we live in the so-called wellness culture. which is a term we see more and more in the media for those who identify with wellness as a movement, something beyond simply caring for our own health. It's fairly common for people to borrow a little bit from New Age practices, to seek mental and spiritual health through diet, even for some to make wellness a kind of religion. Let me ask you, what advice would you give to someone who wants to take a greater interest this year in wellness? Whereas you said very clearly, we're going to be coming upon Great Lent very soon. But here people are being thrown into hundreds of miracle diets, self-help books, fitness programs. I mean, how can you stay focused on Christ and avoid being overwhelmed by all this conflicting advice?
Yes, it's not easy. But I have two thoughts to offer as I reflect on, on this idea of the wellness culture that you bring up and that I deal a lot with my clients. The first would be to be aware that we do not make health the idol, not to make it become the idol or the end all be all. Our bodies are good, right? Our bodies are a gift from God. And they are linked to our soul, and the health of our body is linked to our soul and vice versa, as we outlined with the fasting practices. That's why we have that very physical practice of fasting. And so we must take care of them, but a healthy body is not the end goal. The end goal is theosis, it's communion with God. There are multiple ways to describe the goal of the Christian life, but we have to be able to discern if, this wellness path, whatever path we're on, is, when we zoom out, is it leading us to God? Is it leading us to theosis? And if not, we might need a different path. The second I would say is to be very cautious or watchful of who is presenting these various recommendations or practices or offers. What is their own motivation and what are their values? I'll give one example because I do think that this is quite trendy, if I'll use that word, trendy in the wellness sphere today, and that is the idea of mindfulness or mindful meditation. And I'm definitely not an expert in mindfulness, nor do I want to be, but it's essentially a Buddhist practice that has been really watered down for us in the way that is kind of presented in the mainstream media these days. And it, focuses a lot on non-judgmentally accepting the things in our environment with a goal of peace, reducing the amount of thinking we do, to provide a reprieve from the onslaught of thoughts that are constantly bombarding us. Actually, Father David Smith, who has a podcast on Ancient Faith Radio called Watchful Eating, talks about some of the differences between mindfulness and watchfulness in the Orthodox Church. And, we know that silence and stillness are practices in the Orthodox Church, but I turn to Matthew 12 here, where it talks about the unclean spirit has left the man, and he seeks a place of rest, doesn't find any, so he comes back to the soul that he left, but he finds it all swept and put in good order. But he comes back and he brings 7 of his friends, and then they enter and dwell there. So in one way, I think that highlights the importance of, okay, it's not just a goal of emptying ourselves, but the difference is God. We need God. We need a person, or the person of Jesus Christ, to focus on. And I came across an interesting study. It was someone wrote a doctoral dissertation on the effects of the Jesus prayer on spiritual well-being. And this comes from the study. It says, practicing the Jesus prayer 10 minutes a day per day for 30 days provided the prayer group with a specific technique by which they could replace dysfunctional thinking with the words and thoughts of the prayer. And so here we have one of the most foundational teachings and prayers of the Orthodox Church
Absolutely.
right there for this thing that
Absolutely.
we are all
Absolutely.
kind of circumventing or looking for in the church.
We're on our way to Great Lent very soon. Can you talk a little bit about some of the common challenges that come up? I mean, how can we, I guess, literally set ourselves up for success?
Yes. So the first challenge, or the first mistake, if we can use that word, I often see is people making it all about the food, right? So the discipline of fasting, it's not a legalistic set of dietary rules, but it's a tool to really help us conquer the passions of the flesh. From the Lenten Triodian, I'll quote here. It says, "At all times, it is essential to bear in mind that you are not under the law, but under grace, and that the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. The rules of fasting, while they need to be taken seriously, are not to be interpreted with dour and pedantic legalism, for the kingdom of God is not food and drink, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit." And I'll tell a story. So the parish I was at previously, before the one I'm at now, it was a little OCA mission that had a lot of adult converts to the faith. And this one woman, it was her second Lent, and I was running a little Lenten nourishment group with the church, with the parishioners there, and she had this beautiful aha moment where in her very first Lent, her and her husband were really excited. They had lots of zeal, and her and her husband are going down all the newer aisles at the grocery store, all the plant-based aisles where you get your plant-based meats and your vegan butters, and poring over nutrition labels to look for traces of milk or traces of egg. And then in her second year, she realized, whoa, this is not what it's about. This is way more complicated, where fasting is meant to simplify our eating, help us spend less time in the kitchen, less time meal planning, less time, indulging in more decadent meats and dairy foods, but to bring us back to a more simple way of eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one mistake that it can be easy to fall into. And even myself as a dietitian, sometimes I just get really excited to try new plant-based recipes and new ways to use different legumes or find different vegetables and fruits to incorporate.
I think back on my grandparents who came from parts of Greece to America. They had very, very little education. They had no problem fasting. And they had no problem understanding this balance between mind, body, and soul. So, I mean, I can't bring them back. They're on the kingdom of heaven at this point. But let's look at this. If we're able to give one action item to a Christian was made improving diet, health, their faith a goal in 2023, where would you advise them to get started? I mean, what's the first thing they can do? And are there resources that you could recommend?
One action item, ask for help, whether that is accountability partners in your goals, whether it's support in the home, making your intentions or your goals clear to those nearest you, to ask for help and support there, whether it's professionals, maybe you need to get some professionals on board, health professionals, dietitians, but most importantly, to ask God for help. Because when we talk about our goals and intentions and resolutions, it's very easy to get wrapped up in our own strength, our own willpower, and then on the flip side, our own failures as well if we don't meet those goals. But we have a merciful God. We have a loving God who is waiting patiently outside the doors of our heart, waiting for us to open up. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not how great we are, but how willing are we to open those doors and allow God to work through us.
So true. So very, very true. Where can our audience find you online? Website, social media? Tell us how to get in touch with you.
Sure. So you can find me online at kristafedorchak.com. That's my website. You can find me on Instagram at the Orthodox Dietitian.
Very good.
And I also have a podcast on Ancient Faith Radio called Food Freedom Through Christ, where we do exactly what I talked about in the beginning, is trying to find ways of healing our relationship with food, leading with the teachings and wisdom of the Orthodox Church.
Very good. Krista, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Father Chris.